Everybody back. We're now in our early afternoon block of talks. We're going to have 4 talks in this next series. The first one is by Sellam Abraham, and it's going to be on a new low-res sprite and a background library for animation and games. And I just want to give an extra shout out to Sellam. He's the founder of the Vintage Computer Festivals, which is over 20 years old, and that was some of my first introduction to him was heading to the early ones back in 2000. So great to see you again, Sellam.
And it's great to see you too, Andy. You guys can hear me okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
Oh, good. All right. Well, thank you all for coming for whatever. Oh, there's 235 participants. It's quite a few of you. I'm really honored to be here. It's my first KansasFest, and I was actually planning to come physically, so this will have to do. But I only have 15 minutes, so I'm going to get right into my presentation. I'm going to pause after the initial slides I've prepared and ask questions, and I'm going to have a demo video that hopefully should be queued up to play that'll kind of show the features of the animation system in terms of how you actually use it, and then after that we'll take any final questions. So let me, without further ado, try to share my screen here and hope my computer doesn't take forever to do so. It looks like it's going to, so bear with me. I think, where are we? Oh, that's not it. Forgive me here. Zoom kind of sometimes throws things all over the place. All right, here we go. Please let me know when you can see the Apple II screen.
We have it.
Great. So this is my presentation of the Greasy graphics library. It's a low-resolution sprite and background animation library for the Apple II. It works on all Apple II. As far as I know, I haven't actually tested it in Integer Basic, but it should also work actually from Integer Basic. I'm Sellam Abraham, and this is the premiere release of the library for KansasFest 2020. Thank you and welcome. And so first of all, I wanted to thank some people. First of all, Andy, thank you very much for setting this all up and getting me on and everything. I really appreciate that. And Andy and I definitely go back a long ways, and it's great to see him. And thanks to all the KansasFest organizers. This is really a cool event. You guys have really done a great job pulling this off, considering the circumstances. And I also just wanted to say hi to old friends, Ken Gagney, Charles Mangan, Jason Scott, Vince Briel, and Kay Savitz. I go back a long way with all you guys, and so it's great to finally join you at this event. I should have come years ago. Okay, so without further ado, a background about me. I got interested in computers when I was around 10, and I started to teach myself how to program when I was around 11, 12, first on pencil and paper, and then by age 12, I got my first computer, which is a Mattel Aquarius, and then I had that for about a year and sold that and my Atari 2600 so I could buy my first Apple II Plus with all my money I saved up as a kid. So that was exciting. Apple II Plus, 2 disk drives, and an NEC monochrome monitor. And then I began collecting computers officially around that time, really, because after I sold my Aquarius, I was like, oh man, I had a personal connection, right? Everybody kind of appreciates that. And so I started to just acquire computers and decided I was never going to sell my computers that I owned. And so that's sort of how it began. It was really just an obsession that went insane because I had 30 computers by 1997, but then that's when I joined a mailing list called the Classic Computers mailing list, which is still around. As far as I know, it's the original list for computer collectors. And then shortly after that, realized there's a lot of people who are into this, and so I decided to start the Vintage Computer Festival, which the first event was held, I think, on October 26th and 27th in 1997 at the Pleasanton Alameda County Fairgrounds in Pleasanton, and then did that for about 10 years. In the interim, I founded a business called Vintage Tech, where I did consulting for old computers. Basically, I just turned my hobby into a business and did that for a while, and it was fun and profitable. And then in 2008, I went on hiatus, and then had a couple lifetimes in between, and then here I am back again. So background on the program, the Greasy graphics library. It really kind of began life as a program I wrote in 1985. Some of you might remember vaguely there was a toy called the the Animator by Ohio Art, same people that did the Etch-a-Sketch, and it was like a digital Etch-a-Sketch basically in a little handheld device, and then you would basically draw frames, draw pictures on, and then you had like I don't know how many frames that you could then make a different change in the character or whatever, and then you could run it all through and animate it. And I thought, oh, I could do that in the Apple II, so I did, and that was when I was teaching myself assembly language and all that, and so I wrote this program to basically allow you to draw low-res graphics and then run through them to animate them, and kind of did the same thing. I joined Facebook midsummer about last year and started joining all the retro groups and stuff, and of course found the Apple groups because that's my place. And then in there I met Dan Henderson and saw that Dan was making a bunch of really neat games that I thought were very creative, and it kind of brought me back to those original days, like the early 80s, of people just making experimental games and just doing what they learning how to use the platform and stuff, and that's what Dan was doing. And I saw that he was using basic shape tables, and he was running into the limitations that everybody does eventually. We can't really do a whole lot of stuff practically with graphic shape tables, especially if you're trying to do high-res games. So I wrote him a simple high-res sprite library, just real simple, just allowed him to draw sprites quickly on the screen, graphics and high-res graphics. And then that was Dan made a couple games with that, and then he started sharing with me some low-res artwork that he was doing. It was like fantastic. It's like I'd never seen anything like it on the Apple II. It was just sort of like that modern style on the Apple II, and it just popped to my eyes. And so one thing led to another. I said, hey, let's do a low-res sprite library because it didn't seem like it had ever been done before for the Apple II, and I mean, lots of people have done Apple low-res stuff, especially in more recent years, but there was never really like a way to do low-res graphics. That was kind of skipped over in my mind, so I decided to go in and explore that. So I created this library, and it developed over basically the course of, when I started doing the stuff for Dan until earlier in the year, and then sporadically in between as I try to throw it all together for this presentation and get it released. And I apologize I'm talking so fast, but I have a limited amount of time. So the components of the system are, first of all, you can do low-res sprites, and you can have up to 31 in the sprite table. You can have up to 32 background frames, theoretically. Get into that in a second. There's a basic command interface, so you can program these in easy-to-use commands through the ampersand interface. So you can either do pokes and calls, which you want to do if you're going to compile these programs for later use. You can use the library, of course, compiled programs, and then, of course, the ampersand commands. And it also includes sprite and background frame editor. So it has everything you need to basically create graphics and sprites and everything, create shape tables or sprite tables out of them, and then incorporate them in your own programs. And you'll see that in just a second here. So the Sprite Engine is called Grease, and it resides at 8,000 in memory, which is 32,768. So it's up high in memory to stay out of the way of all your programs and stuff, and allow as much code and data as possible. It occupies only half a K of memory. The sprite table index starts at 8480 in memory, and basically it's just 128 bytes. And that's where you get the 31 sprite tables, plus there's 4 bytes initially for overhead. The sprite data itself is stored in 1.5K. So your total sprite table can only be 1.5K. It's stored at 8,500, and then there's a buffer from 8B100 to 90FF for doing restoring after you do a draw command, and so that's up there. And then you can have sprites of any dimension. It can be 1 pixel by 1 pixel, or it can be 40 by 40 pixels. But practically, you don't want to go that big because the table, of course, 1.5K. The frame engine, which is these are the backgrounds now for painting backgrounds and whatever. It's called a griddle. And it resides in 8,200 in memory, the library itself, so it's right after Grease. And it also occupies only half a K, so the total graphics library between both of these engines is half a K, and you don't need to use one without the other. You can use one without the other. So if you only want the backgrounds, you can do that. If you just want to use the sprites, you can do that. The frame table index, there's some data between the library routines and the sprite data. That's where the frame table index is stored, and so that'll point to where all your frames are in memory. So you literally don't have to have them contiguous. You can have some stuff here, some stuff there, wherever you can fit, if you're going to like really make a big game that taxes the memory. So yeah,
Hey,
the frames
Sellam?
can be available.
Sellam,
Yes.
you've got 5 minutes and your video's about 5. Did you want us to play that now, or you want to keep
No,
going
let me
with
just
that?
go through and finish the presentation, and then people can watch the video on their own at their own leisure, and then I'll use the time that I have remaining after the presentation. I'm
Perfect.
done here to
Okay.
do Q&A. Yep. Okay, and so the frames can be anywhere in memory. And then they're stored as 800 byte files. So basically it's a full screen that's stored actually contiguously. So it's not in the interleaved format. It's just 800 bytes that's painted. So it's exactly 40 by 40. And then, so there could be up to 32 frames, but the practical limit is 24 to 28, just due to, to allow code and all the other stuff. But that's, if you consider you have 24 backgrounds, you can create a world that's like 6 by 4, or you can do 8 by 3, or you can, if you could really figure out how to stuff 32 frames in there, you could do, any size room to 8 by 4 or whatnot. Okay, the basic programming interface. Of course, you have the standard poke call paradigm. The interface is basically through 0-page addresses that are available for basic, starting at location 6. So 6 is always the command. You poke the command there. And then location 7 through 12 are used to pass parameters back and forth. And so here's an example to draw a sprite. You would poke 1 at 6, which is the draw command. We poke 7 with this number, sprite number we want to draw. And then 8, location 8, we poke the horizontal position. 9 would be the vertical position. 10 is the optional color mask. I'll get that into that later, maybe. And then you would call the function, call the routine at 32768, and boom, your sprite would appear on the screen. So, a little bit cumbersome and tedious. You'd have to do it that way to compile the program, but there's an easier way, which is Slick, which is a basic command interface. And that resides up in memory right before the Greasy library, and it uses less than half a K. And has access to all the grease and griddle functions. And so, for instance, here's the sprite functions. You have and draw, so ampersand draw sprite number at horizontal and vertical, right? Real easy. And then to undraw that, we use the restore command. I've overloaded basic command keywords so that the code will be tighter, faster. It doesn't have to interpret a bunch of ASCII. It just finds 1 byte, and that's what I'm doing here. So it's optimized really to run as fast as possible. You can actually do some pretty fast games, and we have one game already been developed in the library by Dan. So restore will undraw the sprite. That's ampersand color is how you set the color mask so that you can actually have transparent sprites, or sprites that don't have the black borders around them or whatnot. And then you can actually grab sprites from a active screen. So that's where you use this command, where you specify the beginning coordinates, the end coordinates, and then optionally you can tell it where to put it in memory. And so you can actually create ad hoc sprites that you can put anywhere in memory. For whatever reason you might come up with in your game, you can just create a sprite with whatever's on the screen. Maybe you can have the player draw their avatar or something like that. And then we have the frame function. So recall, ampersand recall will pull a background up, whatever frame you want, from 1 to 32. And you can also have it, there's copy buffers and all kinds of other features that we can't get into for time. If you want to create a screen and then store it in the memory, into the file, the memory file, you can use the store command. And then for scrolling, I came up with this paradigm using, looks a little awkward at first, but it's step, ampersand step, and then you have the frame you're starting from, and then H line or V line determines whether you're scrolling horizontally or vertically, but it also determines the offset into the screen that you're going to be scrolling, where you're going to start scrolling from. It's hard to explain unless I can show a demonstration. But anyway, those are those commands. And then continuing, the library also supports both pages of the Apple II, so you can actually do page flipping so that you can eliminate flickering. And my demonstrate that, my demonstration videos. So we use the screen command for that. Thank you. And then utility function clear allows you to clear the background to any value between 0 and 255, which will be solid color or whatever. And then there's an amp print command, which is convenience for the programmer, so that you can print, if you're going to be printing using the 4 lines in the bottom, you can print to the on both pages. The editing suite includes Greasel, which is a simple low-res drawing program. Allows cursor navigation. You can edit up to 24 frames simultaneously in memory. Has a copy-paste function, so you can copy stuff between one frame and another and whatnot. And then Griddle is the editing suite for the sprite tables, and you can cut sprites from the screens that you create, the background frames, and then insert them into a sprite table, and then you can create multiple sprite tables with it, as many as you want. That's the end of my introduction. Are there any questions if there's any time? Otherwise, I can go into my chat room later and you can ask them anytime.
Thanks, Salam. Looks like we'll take all those questions over in the chat.
Yeah, I apologize I couldn't show you a video because you could see how it actually functions, but hopefully that gives you an idea. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, and look forward to seeing your questions in the chat room.